Hey, good morning. It's Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. People like to joke about how we embrace the dark, rainy winters around here. But the truth is, the lack of sunlight is really tough for some people. I'll talk with psychologist Kathleen Cook of Seattle University about seasonal affective disorder in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. The National Weather Service says it will be cooler and drier today, which is good news because there's a lot to deal with. Yesterday's storm brought 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts that took down trees and power lines. Rivers overflowed their banks, including the Skagit, where 3 people were rescued when they were caught in a flood. The town of Mount Vernon declared a civil emergency because of flooding. And then there's a mudslide blocking I-5 North near Bellingham. Officials think it's going to be a while before they can clear that. Late Monday, Puget Sound Energy said it still had more than 100,000 customers without power. Brace yourself, the next weather system arrives Thursday. Meanwhile, 3,000 hospital workers around the state left their jobs rather than get vaccinated. The State Hospital Association said yesterday that about 94% of hospital staff met Governor Inslee's deadline. 4% got exemptions or are in the process of getting it done, and 2% left or lost their jobs. Officials say they saw higher vaccination rates in urban areas, lower in rural. Now, hospitals are working hard to retain and hire people to make it through a staffing crunch. And new traffic cameras are coming to Seattle streets to bust drivers who block intersections, crosswalks, and transit lanes. SDOT says signs will start going up this month at 8 known bad behavior intersections in downtown, South Lake Union, Belltown, Pioneer Square, and along 99. They won't start writing tickets until next year. When they do, first offense gets you a warning. Second offense gets you fined, $75. If you've been feeling down lately, you are not alone.
Yes, I've definitely been affected a lot by the recent rain and dark days.
That's Dina Popovkina. She's a neuroscientist based here in Seattle. She suffers what's called seasonal affective disorder, also known as SAD. And when it's hitting her, she finds it's hard to get the motivation to do the things she loves.
One of the things I really enjoy is social dancing. And whenever seasonal affective disorder sets in, I stop wanting to show up to dance events and stop interacting so much with my friends in that community. And that really affects kind of my relationships with people that are regularly, a part of my life.
Seasonal affective disorder affects about 5% of adults. More of those people are clustered far from the equator, like we are. Kathleen Cook is the chair of the psychology department at Seattle University, and she says SAD is a mood disorder, where the people who suffer from it behave in ways that are not unlike that of a hibernating bear.
We like to go into our caves, if you will. We like to eat up to prepare for the long winter. We tend to, one of the features of SAD, and some of us that may not even experience it as a diagnosable disorder might find out that as the winter months come on, we're craving some more things, putting more things in our mouths, and we're also craving more of those starchy things, those things that would bring on a lot of calories, which I guess could be likened to a bear, preparing for the winter. I'm not sure that our lives require that, but I think it's something that we do. So yeah, I think there are some features about that. When things get dark, we do like to retreat to our safe spaces. And that's kind of probably an ingrained fear from when we were, historically through our lives. We know that when things are dark, we often experience some threat. And so what do we want to do? We want to go to our safe places and cocoon and make sure that we keep all threats at bay.
Yeah, there might be something primal to this.
Indeed.
So you could become more depressed. You might notice you're feeling a little down. You may notice you're sleeping a little bit more. You're craving carbohydrates and maybe eating at weird times. This is interesting to me because these are the kinds of things that seem like they could sneak up on you and you wouldn't even realize it. So I wonder, what should I be looking out for?
Well, any of these things are compounded also by the time of year, right? So it also turns out that we tend to have some of our vacations that are scheduled in our calendars. And we also have quite a few holiday events, which might, and both of those things might bring about maybe different sleep patterns and different eating patterns. So I don't want anyone to be thinking that if something changes, that means something's wrong. With all behaviors, it's when they become dysfunctional, when they become problematic, when you're not doing things that you would normally want to do, when you're eating in such a way that has nothing to do with hunger or celebration, it's just because when you're sleeping as a method of avoidance, and it signifies a lack of engaging in the day and in your life. I mean, it's always that old thing that it's when it's no longer in moderation that we want to worry.
Yeah, yeah. How can you tell the difference between just being blue and having an actual mood disorder?
Well, that's a hard thing to generalize about. It's again, that goes back to that little cusp of when it becomes something completely dysfunctional, when it's something that's interfering with your life. I mean, in the reality, it would be inappropriate if we didn't all have some down days, right? We are going to have moments that are rough and tough, and particularly in this particular social and political climate. I mean, if you're paying attention, there's probably some things that are affecting you. That said, if it's prolonged and it's not affected by external stimuli, but by people in your life, but it just seems to be pervasive and chronic across situations and time, that's when we worry. And certainly if anyone thinks that might be true for them, then it's worth talking to someone about, and if you don't have a therapist, if you're not connected with someone, then your primary doctor is a good place to start.
Who is most affected by this, Kathleen?
It is women way more. And women, of course, beat themselves up about it a lot more, right? So they, maybe start putting on some weight, or they aren't getting as much done as they did before, or they don't feel like, being the happy, chipper mom going on all the holiday activities. So I think it affects women more, and the ramifications for women are tougher.
Fascinating. Yeah, really fascinating. And it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, we're really good at beating ourselves up. and the pandemic certainly has brought up, I think, has made people more conscious of how much more women are often caring in a family setting. And then, of course, we can be very harsh on ourselves when we're not holding up those standards about, looking good, taking care of ourselves, being engaged, all of that. Doesn't mean that men can't be affected. It's just that we see the occurrence most often in women who are 20 years or older. And of course, then it's correlated with how far away from the equator you are.
Right. Mostly the Northern Hemisphere.
Right. That's how we know it's a thing, because we actually don't know what causes SAD. We know that the weather or the seasons change, stuff happens, and then people feel sad. But that stuff happens. We don't actually know what the proximal cause for each individual is who experiences SAD. We just simply know that it's brought on by the reduction in sunlight.
Let's talk strategies. What can you do about feeling sad during the winter?
Well, I think the first thing is that to recognize that sad is not a bad thing, meaning in terms, if you have a down day, most of the time for most of us, down moments pass, and to not overreact to them. If we are having, a lot of downness, then it's probably the first thing to do is to look at your everyday habits, which is, are you still doing some of the things that you did before the weather turned and the dark arrived? I mean, are you still getting out and engaging in the world? Are you exercising and moving your body? Are you eating, well, if you're putting on some more carbohydrates, maybe okay if you're also balancing that with a fair amount of nutritious food. Are you drinking more than you did before, or self-medicating in some other way? So all of those basic things about eat well, sleep well, take care of yourself, exercise. So good health in general is a great place to start. Then some people find themselves very responsive to things like light therapy. So on days such as today, your chance of getting out and getting some sunlight, slim to none. But yeah, but there are a lot of sunny days really in Seattle through the winter. It just doesn't last very long. So one of the things that we can do is try to get out during those, maybe it's a lunch hour, maybe it's a break, maybe it's a walk for a coffee or something, and to experience what sunlight there is. Or you can use artificial sunlight, and some people really find that terrific. There are a variety of lamps you can set up right by your workstation or wherever it is you do, and they put out or mimic the kind of sunlight or the experience of sunlight, such that your body then can make some of the maybe vitamin D and some of the things that we lose during the winter months.
I would imagine just recognizing that you're dealing with seasonal affective disorder is also helpful in some ways, because you can wake up and say, oh my gosh, I feel like garbage. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe it's the sun.
I think that's very wise, Patricia. There's a lot to this that is about just being kind to yourself and accepting the situation. What I mean by that is that we have a lot of confounding things happening at this time of year. Elections go on, holidays go on, and those sorts of things can really positively affect some of us and negatively affect some of us. And then you put on top of that the fact that then we have these shorter days and darker days. And there's a lot of things going on. And if we can recognize that what we are experiencing is situational and will pass, that really is helpful to think that this is something that we will get through. We will be fine. The weather will return to what we know and love about Seattle, most of us. And that is really can be reassuring.
You know, Kathleen, it's funny because you're talking about getting out in the sun and taking advantage of the sun. And you're reminding me of the newsroom where we would get a sun break and everybody would leap out of their chair and say, the sun is out, and everybody would leave. I would imagine being able to have agency over taking care of yourself is important here too.
It certainly is. We have to appreciate that the structures that we work in and live in have to support us taking care of ourselves, which would mean that our jobs and our lives allow us to step out when we do see the sun, have that sun break. And then also that if our lives are so constrained that we aren't able to move about the world, take care of errands, exercise and all that, and until it is dark, that then we need to have safe, well-lit parking lots, safe, well-lit streets, places that we can move around in the same way we would have when it was daylight all the time.
So support is really important here. It's not just on us to come up with ways
not.
to help ourselves.
Right. And communities like ours that have a great deal of darkness during the regular business day need to really think about how we're supporting our communities, our employees, our staff.
Kathleen Cook, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're most welcome. It's been my pleasure, Patricia.
Kathleen Cook is the chair of the psychology department at Seattle University. Thanks for listening. Caroline Chamberlain Gomez produced today's show. Our production team is Diana Opong, Clare McGrane, Jenny Cecil Moore, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Patricia Murphy.